Now, I'm not recording this video just so you can see all of the books that are behind me in my personal library. This video is not meant to be a sort of exercise of my intellect over other people. These are all just words on a page. And for all you know, I've only read some of these books. But by virtue, my most popular video on this channel so far, I thought I would talk a bit more about my fondness for one particular album by the Voidz versus another. Before we get to that, some housekeeping. First and foremost, thank you to anyone who has watched the short that I released on Monday, January 15th. I've been on kind of a relax spree since then to just kind of ease back into the whole process of making stuff and putting it out there, and then moving on in the cycle. Just trying to learn how to feel my way through it again. And so anyone who took time to watch it, I hope it was worth the time. That seems to be increasingly decreasing for all of us, whatever kind of spare time we can give. And then the other piece of housekeeping is a Julian Casablancas update. For those who watched the most popular video on this channel, you were told that Julian Casablancas could come to my house for some cheese and crackers and shelter. He was invited, particularly for cheese and crackers, and we got stocked on the crackers. I got those mini sleeves of Ritz in the cupboard of the kitchen, and then we got Colby Jack. There's some cheddar. I think there's some white cheddar too. Maybe even like a Swiss or a Gouda. There's some kind of artisan cheese in there as well, if that's the kind of palate he's working nowadays. But unfortunately, he has not yet taken me up on that offer. And Jules, if you happen to also encounter this video, again, it's the world is so harsh and cold, but also has pockets that are warm and loving, and you're more than welcome into this warm and loving pocket. If I need to entice you anymore, I also have Nintendo Switch. You can actually see all my Nintendo in another video, Jules, if you are so interested. GameCube, Wii U, there's some Game Boy, DS. I didn't even get on those in the video that's on this channel. It could be a grand old time, Julian, and then could go back to your merry ways. But that aside, I was surprised. I shouldn't say I'm surprised. In my unboxing video, many left comments that basically we're not on the side of Tyranny and we're on the side of Virtue as the better Voidz album. And before I get into my piece about these pieces, I want to start by talking about what I like about Virtue. Because even though Virtue is not my favorite project by the Voidz, there are some notable appeals that it has versus their debut album, Tyranny. For one, if you're looking for the catchier hooks, you're going to find them on Virtue. Virtue is an album that has a more refined melodic approach to each of its tracks, and on top of that, its eclecticness between genres caters to different kinds of audiences, and that was the intent with that album, was for the Voidz to make music that could be more digestible for a more general audience, especially songs like Leave It in My Dreams, which doesn't really get too pushy in terms of like experimenting with harmonies and things like that. Even Permanent High School doesn't as well. It falls kind of into this weird like lo-fi rock kind of sound. Pyramid of Bones is an incredibly accessible glam rock type of song, and it just keeps going through the whole album. They have a couple weird ones. Curious, for a regular audience, might be deemed weird, even though it's still a fairly simple song in its construction. It just kind of falls into these interesting timbres given the way they harmonize Jules' voice and the overall kind of Arabic feel to the song. And then the weirdness on Virtue, I would say, only extends to songs like My Friend the Walls, which even that just it sounds more like a Weeknd song in the hook. When it gets to the chorus, it just sounds purely like a Weeknd riff. And then the verses are kind of more of the weird parts to that song. One of the ones just has it's a song that's tough to listen to lyrically. Julian's vocals are incredibly blended into the instruments, and so it kind of falls into this weird camp. But then otherwise, Lazy Boy is like a Mac DeMarco type of like chill, regular old alt rock song. Black Hole just falls into this line of like Misfits kind of sounding, or like that old 70s punk rock sound. Even We're Where We Were does as well. The whole album doesn't really try to go any. It goes some weird places, but it doesn't in an incredibly harsh way, and I think that's why a lot of people like Virtue. The songwriting is fairly tight in that regard, and in all honesty, if you're just finding one of these songs in rotation on your playlist, you're more likely to listen to them as a single versus the experience being top down, which is still good. I have Virtue on vinyl. It's a good album, but I wish I had Tyranny on vinyl. My record store did not have it. And so that aside, with Virtue, Tyranny remains in a much higher place in my heart. And I'll admit, it's there on several biases that I have. For one, I found the album at the right time in my life. And I think I've talked about this in some other videos on this channel too. The whole idea that a lot of art, when you encounter it or choose to engage with it, you'll come to find that no matter like when it came out, you find it at a time you need it most, or like it's harboring some kind of lesson or inspiration or some other component that you can't really break down that strikes such a necessary chord with you, whether of like what you're going through at that moment, what you're thinking about, problems that you're trying to rationalize and equate in your head. And Tyranny was especially an album like that for me. I have other biases as well in terms of just what the album focuses on. For one, politically, it aligns with a lot of my perspectives on the world. The artistry of the album, just in how it reflects on like Julian's experience as an artist and his path as an artist. While I'm not a well-known artist in this world, there are loads of inspirational pieces to this album that have been pivotal for my path to figuring out how to go about what I do in the world, as well as just trying to navigate the world as a whole. And then the third and last bias, I think, is just my own personal taste of what makes a great record, versus, you know, just a record that has great songs. And I think it's akin to maybe like you watch a movie and you can tell what's a really good movie based on all of the moving parts versus a movie that has some good scenes, but then you think back to the whole experience and it doesn't have that same kind of richness that a fully engrossing movie does, where each character is moving in their own way and the plot is moving in its own way as well, and you get fully immersed into that. And Tyranny was that kind of record for me. It felt like a true experience, which I really didn't have with Virtue. And in part, I think that's because Tyranny, even though it's messy, just in how it sounds, it's not messy in its production at all. It's an incredibly refined album. And I've always had an interest in music that comes off harsh, but it still fits into this oddly appealing sound. And Tyranny's chock full of it. It's antithetical in the way that it's trying to make good music, but then at the same time, sonically, it's coming off with the same kind of oppressive and foreboding and aggressive sound that its subject matter also puts out onto its people. Every single song off of Tyranny, for one, sonically, flows so smoothly. From a top to bottom listening experience, the album is phenomenal and consistent. It doesn't deviate in certain ways, and so it feels like then you're listening to something continuously unfurl versus getting deposited into these different universes, which, you know, that's a to each their own type of thing when evaluating albums. But even though Tyranny's loaded with these harsh tones and these long songs, I don't think that's indicative of a sloppy album, because you listen to the musicianship that like Amir and Beardo and even vocally Julian bring to this album. There is not an accidental piece on any of these songs, and every single move that is made through these compositions continues to carry whatever emotional weight each song is trying to carry. And then on top of that, with the sonic consistency through the album, it creates this context for each song as well. So like, you will listen to a song off Virtue and it'll be catchy and such like that, but then that's the song. It's contained within that experience. But at least for me, when I hear a song off Tyranny, because I had such a rich and engrossing introduction to the album, and so when I listen to any song out of context, it brings up the same feelings that I had when I was listening to the album top to bottom. You listen to one song and in a way you're listening to all of the surrounding songs again, because you can remember the time and place where that song sits, and on top of that, the emotions that you are experiencing through that listen, from when you listen to Human Sadness and then are deposited into Where No Eagles Fly. I think that's the song that follows on that album. Anyway, I've listened to Tyranny so many times, and even I still sometimes forget the order of the songs. And so a lot of my love of this album comes from it as a whole piece, because each song continues to evolve that idea, that focus of tyranny as this force that exists within nature. And to do that also with a kind of oppressive and aggressive tone is an incredibly interesting approach to me, for one. But then on top of that, how the story is weaved from song to song into its climax. I have not had an album listening experience like it ever. And that might somewhat be on me, because there are lots of albums out there. I think maybe Congratulations is closest, but no, this could also mean that I need to be exposed to more music, possibly. But just to run through the tracks quickly, Take Me in Your Army, such a beautiful starter to the concept. And also, for an album called Tyranny, already you're being buckled in to what will be a fight. And then Crunch Punch is just such an incredibly catchy, hit you in the face kind of rock song, where it also it creates this dissonance just in the idea of, I can't live on a farm forever. For one, that's something Julian sings a lot. There's also a conflict between the puppeteer and the puppet, and it just for the most part, it's probably one of the catchiest songs on the whole album. I think Crunch Punch is probably one of their more accessible songs off the whole album. Then you get into Mad, which is this, it almost is an interlude between something as snappy as Crunch Punch and something as melancholic and solemn and episodic. How many other words is the Odyssey, Human Sadness? It's one of the most popular songs the band released. It's a good song. It's an interesting song. It has an interesting origin because apparently Julian and Jake were vibing with some classical music or something, and then Jake made the bass riff, and then it came from this little tiny demo into this 11-minute saga that also came on the tail of Julian's dad dying, and so it has that interesting emotional element to it as well, and it's an incredible piece that can stand on its own, beyond where it rests inside of Tyranny. And Where No Eagles Fly is just kind of, I think that's probably the most accessible. It's Where No Eagles Fly and then Crunch Punch are the most accessible songs on the album. And Where No Eagles Fly, just another song that's kind of talking about people who are vicious and carnivorous, and how that coincides with the path that we're on. Where do we go? Where is the future? It keeps on coming somehow, and everyone just keeps on devouring one another. After Where No Eagles Fly, to me, is where the album becomes the most interesting, because Father Electricity has this super African groove to it with a freaking amplified kalimba. Things start to get a lot weirder on the second half of this album, and it has this interesting feel to almost like you're looking back to a more kind of basic time in humanity, and that coinciding with what you dream about, what you want, and it has an incredibly human feel to it, just by the use of that like continuous groove of the drums and the kalimba. It creates this interesting march of time that goes along with the difficulty of seeing the future, because you are everything I see. Every time I blink, I see despair. I think that's what the line is. It's another kind of tone-setting song. From there, the album goes to Johann von Bronx, which is one of my favorite songs on the album, Lyrically, it goes a lot of places. It doesn't seem cohesive in the direction of the lyrics, but also what Julian Casablancas' song really does. Aside from that, it has such a simple instrumental, but it's so catchy and groovy, and it builds so classically as well, where it starts on that kind of half, I think it's like a semitone melody of the bum 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 bum, and then when the key changes after the first time around, it goes up a fourth, which is it creates this uneasy but still kind of satisfying sound to the ear, and everything is everything is moving towards this place that really hits a vulnerable spot by Julian's vocals when he sings the line, wait for the back of his heart, lesson learned. Just from everything that you were listening to prior to that and where the instruments were going, and then the harmonics of everything after you get removed from that offbeat hi-hat groove, that freaking disco vamp that they use in that bridge to the end. Johann von Bronx, in a way, is a reflection of ego, which itself is tyrannical too, in a way, and just instrumentally also captures that same feeling that, it's like Johann von Mozart, or whatever his name was, Johann von Bach. I forget what the guy's actual, Ludwig von Bach, I think was his name. But like the title is a play on those kinds of people, and it's also, and it being an embodiment of Julian's ego in a way, also is carried so nicely by a real nice musical composition, a real demonstration of classical skill as well as just structure. Business Dog, that Business Dog is just meant to be a fun song. It goes on this kind of almost like Coheed and Cambria 4/4/3/4 switch. At this point, it probably would be more like a King Gizzard kind of thing for like just like where those kinds of time moves sit inside the popular culture now. And yeah, it's just this. To me, it just reminds me of just like what a cokehead would be like. Just always looking for the next thing and looking to feast on something. And on top of that, you have that kind of that businessman like ship, to make up another word, juxtaposed. That was what I was trying to think of. With license plates, which like everyone. I shouldn't say everyone. When I think of license plates, I think to prisoners, because in America, unfortunately, we have our license plates made by prisoners who are by no means paid the amount of their labor. And so that those as juxtaposed images are interesting, not really clear or like well constructed lyrically in their juxtaposition of the song, but they exist simultaneously inside this world, inside my brain. And aside from that, there's a line where Beardo just kind of screams, and then good job, Business Dog. Album starts to settle then with the ballad Xerox, which is the Pink Ocean equivalent from Virtue, or I should say Pink Ocean is the Xerox equivalent on Virtue. And Xerox is just kind of it moves on. It moves forward with that idea of despair that is first introduced inside of Father Electricity. The entire song is about all kinds of despair of like, will the world end in front of me, and all these things that I want, will I even want them at a certain point? It's a low point of the album, and to me it's kind of it's a introspection of all of these despairs. Why it's called Xerox then, I don't know. Then from Xerox, album goes to Dare I Care, which to me almost is such a perfect setup for the next song off of Tyranny. Dare I Care almost feels kind of like Tourist off of Julian's solo album, thematically at least, because it carries some ideas of like on these lands that I walk, you know, or people is where people used to live, or all my friends used to live, is the line off of Dare I Care. And the song itself brings back certain motifs from other parts of the album. I think of like Crunch Punch, where it's kind of bouncy. Dare I Care is bouncy in a more encroaching kind of way, where the drums go bum 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 bum, and that kind of groove also at least feels like it feels like a progression from that groove from Father Electricity earlier, so it just kind of nestles into the ears well, just as a sound we've heard before. Dare I Care ultimately, to me, sets up for the grand finale, and a song that hits so much harder after experiencing everything else, and that's Nintendo Blood. Nintendo Blood may be a perfectly written song. It doesn't have to be 3 minutes long. It's the perfect length. Its length enhances the experience because it gives you time to breathe in what is happening, because Nintendo Blood is essentially taking everything we've learned or everything we've heard off of every other song on the album and is visiting piece by piece by piece by piece, and doing so in this incredibly charming, almost like bossa nova kind of groove, while Julian is so softly singing, and slowly it goes from this kind of sweet sounding song to whammo. It goes into something incredibly harsh, and that swiftness in sonic change, for one, greatly embodies to me what Tyranny in a way is. You know, it kind of sneaks up on you and things suddenly shift immediately, and you know, it's represented through the instrumentation as well. The guitars, I don't know what the actual interval is, but just in how they're distorted or such, they don't fit right, and it creates this unease that then settles back into the bubbliness that we're familiar with, and then it happens again. And the whole song just keeps building. After this whole album has been building, and then gets to, I don't know how they did this, but it gets to this point where Julian starts singing a Chief Seattle quote, and he's doing it with the sound that the freaking eraser makes in Super Mario Maker. I don't know how, or how, like, for one, I feel like every time I hear that, I go, that's why it's called Nintendo Blood, because one of his kids must have been playing freaking Mario Maker. I don't know, but he's singing that Chief Seattle quote, which itself it's a beautiful statement, and I shouldn't say, yeah, it's an accurate statement as well, of just kind of the greed of man, which if you if you want a funny listen to this song, you can listen to them perform it live on this Brazilian talk show, and they don't have the sound that makes Julian sound like Mario Maker, and the sound they do have is so much funnier. It's an amazing performance. And so Nintendo Blood builds and gets to this quote about how man's hunger for more is insatiable, and they will keep consuming until their destruction, you know, by virtue of destroying everything around them, like a sort of manifesting prophecy. The last few lines of this song are so beautiful, just in the if you look at them in the perspective of like a great creator, whoever that is, if there is any, in my mind, it's more so if you personify society as a whole. And Julian, after singing the Chief Seattle quote, goes, "Our land is a brother that we treat like an enemy. Our land is a brother that we treat like an enemy. Oh, but nothing matters except the universe, molecules, and empty space, which those itself are focuses of, like scientific pursuit and societal growth." And so then from there, the next line is, "The moon is cracked. I think it looked at me and grinned," which itself is already saying that that something is off. Something in the natural world is breaking. And then on top of that, the delusion through the illusion of that thing that's breaking being something that's positive, it itself is that's just a common thread in this world, especially in modern society where things seem to be continuously falling apart, but things also are perpetually okay somehow. The room is packed. I look around and now it spins. That itself is a continuation of the delusion. This time things are starting to get out of control. And then from there, Cyborg, I need to sit down, I need to shut up, which kind of touches on the idea that technology, in a way, well, it does rule over us. And we're already kind of settling into the not the disorder, the disorientation that the world is starting to go through. It's almost like a boulder that's going downhill. And then universe, everything is wrong, where you're pleading to the end. Society is pleading to the end through all of the hardships that tyranny demonstrates of despair and pain and suffering and sadness and these other elements that are all created by these tyrannical things of emotion and authority and other factors inside of this world. Julian pleads to the universe, everything is wrong. And if you look at this as the trajectory of society, where it's unfurling in this way, where everything is starting to spin out of control and beyond our control into this greater thing that could harm way more people than help. Universe, everything is wrong. I think I fucked up. And the way Julian delivers that line is in such a poignant way that it captures the whole album. The whole idea of, we've built this society and we have all of these hardships as a result, and technology is advancing much faster beyond our control, and resources are running out and problems are arising, and the way they're being handled are not in ways that are equitable or even justifiable or ethical in some respects. And this whole idea of society, as it's going and going and going and going, at a certain point, at least if it could reflect, because it's not a person, you'd wonder, why would we create a system like this that harms so many people? Universe, everything is wrong. I think I fucked up. I don't trust myself, or whatever the last thing is. And then Julian goes, I am not myself. And then you go to Off to War, which is the somber battle cry, where we go through all of this, and it's time to sit with it all. Time to sit with just the ideas of how our world controls us, how it oppresses us, how it imbodes on us. And from there, if you have the album on repeat, you can join the army. Tyranny's such an incredible listening experience, and I don't think even my words and just rambling about it fully do justice to the profound experience I had, as well as just the overall impact and meaning the album has on me, both just as a regular person and even creatively as an artist. And I don't think I talk about some of those things in part because many songs, they mean different things to different people, and I only feel like I should share certain elements to my interpretation that feel extremely personal to me versus, you know, others that kind of lean towards like soft preference and such, because I also want people to have the opportunity, if they've never listened to this record, to hear it without influence fully from my experience. Because what makes Tyranny such a rich record for me as well is that no one told me what it's about. No one told me what songs to listen to off it, how to feel about it. I had a growing interest in Julian Casablancas as an artist, and I visited the album at a time where it turned out the message was incredibly resonant with me, and because I lacked that that influence of other opinions and such, it became a more personal piece of art for me to appreciate. And there's no way that I can give that sort of experience to anyone else. I can just hope that that people, if they listen to this album, might be able to glean their own sort of personal attachment to the work and the themes and the meanings, and maybe find something resonant there. But I don't think anyone will have the same kind of appreciation for this album that I do, and that's okay. You might have it with other artists that aren't the Voidz. I have it with some other artists as well. That's what art is. It's, in a way, not something that we own, because these aren't things that we made, but we let them so deeply into us that they help us figure out the world, for one, and on top of that, help us in figuring out our own perspective of things. And so it's almost like these pieces of art are like, you know, cousins and brothers and sisters inside of our family, because they aren't us, but, you know, in a way they're part of our blood. And I hope that if maybe you haven't given Tyranny a try, don't try it right after watching this video, because like all good art, you should come to it when you feel ready, when you feel like you want to sit down and engage with it. But I've said my piece on why I think Tyranny is the better Voidz album of the two. I don't think there's going to be a third one anytime soon, but the singles have been pretty bomb, and that's not like in the bad bomb. I mean, all bombs should be bad technically, but like this one was da bomb. If the duh separates it from the duh. Thank you for watching. If you did, I'm going to try and get back to uploading more on this channel. Might do some more rambles about some of my favorite albums. But Julian, especially if you watch to the end, thanks, man. I know things are busy right now. Say hi to the crew for me, Amir and all of them. You can say hi to Al and them too if you want. Yeah. Don't forget the cheese and crackers are still here. I got Nintendo. And if you're interested, you can also boot up my PC and play my unbeaten save file of Bully Scholarship Edition. I know how much you love that, Jules. Actually, I think I might go do that now. So I'm going to go play some Bully. Thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting this channel and what I do, because it truly means a lot to be able to express myself.